3 o'clock, and I'm sure some additional participants will come in to join us. We have a very interesting invited speaker, Susan DeLoya, who is a client success advocate, Asia, for Blackboard. And she's going to be speaking about next generation problem-based learning, the potential for learning thresholds. Very interesting. So we'll turn it over to Susan.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for coming. We're a very intimate group, but that can lend itself. We can maybe move up a little bit if you're in the back, and maybe this can be more of like a seminar. Would be really wonderful. Oh, great, we have some giveaways. Fantastic. Just in time. Okay, so this session is going to be about problem-based learning and about how we can maximize the digital learning environment with learning thresholds. So I'll go into what I mean by learning thresholds throughout this interactive presentation. So how's the sound? Everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. So before I get into the heart of the matter, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Susan DeLoya, and I work for Blackboard. I've been in education for about 20 years, and they wrote that I was an associate professor. They gathered that. I had that title when I was a professor in Vietnam. So before I worked for Blackboard, I was a professor in Vietnam, and that's where that title comes from. So I have an interdisciplinary background and really get great joy out of supporting clients throughout Asia. I've been in Asia for about 7 years. Oh, okay, thank you so much. So I think this is the same. No difference, right? Oh, it's a little better? So my role with the company is to actually support institutions that use our solutions. So whether you're using Blackboard Learn, whether you're using Blackboard Ultra, or the Open LMS, which I'll talk about a bit later, I'm here to advocate on your behalf, to listen to what you want to do with the system, and actually hopefully inspire you and your teams to be able to move forward. If you have any questions for me, you can email me at any time. And I'd love to hear from different practitioners in the field. Any questions about this presentation or digital learning, I'd love to hear from you. So I have a North American accent, you can probably tell, but I actually live in Singapore, so I'm your neighbor. So before I get into the heart of the matter, I'm going to give you a quick little unofficial poll. We're going to jump into this idea. Rote or incremental memorization is the primary way to learn. Now, we're such a small group that I'm actually not going to digitalize this. We're going to do it by hand. So how many people think this is true? Okay. I've got 3, 4 people. How many people think this is false? 3 people. How many people are not sure? Okay, wonderful. About 4 or 5 people. We just got a bell curve, didn't we? We got about a third. A third of the people think it's true. The third of the people think it's false. A third of people are not sure. So what happens when you're a professor or you're an instructor and you ask your learners a question and they don't give you the best answer? Now, interestingly enough, the question I just gave you, actually, none of them are wrong answers. It's all relative. However, as an instructor or professor, I may have a bent on where I'm taking the concept. I see some people nodding, so I think you can maybe relate to what I'm saying. So if I could just show off one digital component in the Open LMS system, it's called the Personal Learning Designer. Now, you see here the gentleman joining the course, that's you in this room. I just asked you a question, and look, we had 3 different answers, right? If you set this up in your course, you could automate where you want your learner to go based on how they answer. This is a really fine piece of digital technology that I think really helps the educator. You cannot necessarily redirect by hand every time a student veers in a certain direction. Isn't it true? You're exhausted. And this is where technology can really support us. So the content or the next activity depends on how they performed. All right, so for those of you that said, I don't know, or you think it is the best way to learn rote memorization, I'd like to do another little exercise that, that actually addresses this concept. How students organize knowledge influences how they learn and apply what they know. I'd like you to consider the following code key. Oh, someone smart, snapping a picture. Now, I'd like you to write your cell phone number using the code key. Go. Can you do it? Some of you are laughing at me. Some of you are actually trying. How many people think this is kind of challenging? I think it's very challenging. The first time someone did this for me. What would you like me to do? Sometimes people tell me to go back because they want to look at this again, right? What if I gave you that? Is it easier? Okay, I see everybody nodding. You think it's easier. Of course it's easier because I've given you a structure. I've given you a pattern. Now, for someone like me, it's still challenging, right? Because this isn't my domain, but it's a lot more manageable. So what's my point? My point is actually, rote memorization actually is a very inefficient use of the brain. That's my argument as a professor right now. And when the learner memorizes isolated facts or figures, they're actually producing an unproductive pattern of learning. Now, I could share some scholarship that would support the other side of the argument, but right now I'm a professor advocating for this side of the argument, and I have some citations, some scholarship about this. So what have I just done? I actually personalized your thinking. Based on your response, I've given you another little activity and another piece of feedback to be able to reconsider your point of view. And with the personal learning designer, you can actually automate that. Has anybody heard of Cane & Cane, by the way? I first read Cane & Cane about 20 years ago. They deeply influenced my pedagogy, and I highly recommend these thinkers. Okay, so what I just went through is this idea of a personal learning designer. Automates content, activities, and assessments according to how a learner performs. And this can be really, really helpful when we address problem-based learning, because that's the heart of this session. The heart of this session really is about PBL. But just to kind of get you a little intrigued, I wanted to show you that cool little tool that we offer and that my colleague a bit later will briefly show you in his demo. Okay, so for the remainder of my presentation, I'd like to give you an outline of my focus. We're going to spend a little bit of time on next generation learners. Maybe you call these millennial learners, maybe you call them Gen Z, maybe you have your own name for them. I'll go into problem-based learning, the archetypes of problem-based learning. We'll get into this idea of liminal spaces. If you've never heard of that, no problem. I'm going to go over what that means and how they can become learner thresholds. Then we're going to jump into a PBL exercise. And then I will show you a bit how the Blackboard Open LMS can actually host and offer different levels of commitment from our learners. Now, at any point in this presentation, if you want to stop me, interrupt, ask a question, it doesn't bother me at all. I'm from New York City. We do that all the time, for better or for worse. So please, your interest, your questions, your point of view matters a lot in this session. All right, so let's think of characteristics of millennial learners. And when we think of a millennial learner, what do we think of? By the way, is anybody here a millennial? Raise your hand. You were born in 1985 or later. Sam, put your hand down. Liar, liar, pants on fire. Okay, we've got one. My colleague Ash is millennial. Anybody else? I think in the back, one person looks millennial to me. Yeah. Baby boom. Any baby boomers? All right, baby boomer in the house. How about Gen X? I'm an old Gen X myself. Okay, if my father was here, he's in his 80s, he would be silent generation, before the baby boomer, right? So maybe you have some silent generation staff in your school. All right, so what are the characteristics of the millennial learners, the younger learners? They're first generation digital natives, they're tech savvy, they have a strong multitasking capability. Is this good or bad, or both? Both. I couldn't agree with you more. In some ways it's great, in some ways we're losing deep thinking, right? They're ambitious, maybe. Shorter attention spans. Is it true that we all have shorter attention spans? I think my attention span has reduced a lot in the last 5 years. Easily distracted? Maybe all of us a bit more, right? Because of our relationship to technology. They need a clear and definitive goal and outcome. Maybe a little more guidance. They need recognition. They need constant feedback. That's why you need a digital learning environment that's going to automate some of that feedback, because it's a lot of labor, isn't it? They need flexibility. I definitely had a flexible approach when I was in Vietnam. I used to get emails all the time. Can I have an extension? Can I have an extension? Can I have an extension? My answer was always, yes, 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 because I wanted a piece of work, right? Okay, by 2025, 3 out of every 4 employees around the world will be millennial. So these tendencies, these behaviors, they're not really going anywhere. They're maybe becoming a bit more streamlined. Does anybody want to add one before I move on from your experience? What they do say, yeah, somebody, yes, please.
They lack of patience. Need something to be quick.
Yes.
Short time, shorter.
They lack patience. We have to teach them how to have patience. Yeah, that's a really good point. So we as instructors, we have become different kinds of guides where we are disseminating different kinds of skills. The only other thing I would just add quickly before moving on is the younger generation, younger than my colleague Ash, like the 15, 16, 17-year-olds, as digital savvy as they are, they do like face-to-face group work. So we are seeing a bit of a shift where as digitally focused as we are, the learners are not completely running away from some kind of face-to-face group experience. And this is kind of encouraging, and definitely encouraging for the blended learning environment. Okay, so what are some of the learning challenges in the 21st century broadly that learners have to deal with? Global awareness, strengthening independent thought, ethical responsibilities required by complex environments, developing cross-cultural relationships. Okay, so this presentation today, this interactive presentation, is a mini presentation. If we were doing a full-on workshop, which I do with the clients I work with, I would actually have you pick which of these themes is most relevant for your digital coursework. And we would actually be fleshing that out. I'm kind of moving quickly now. But these are fluency in technology, designing information for global audiences. How many of you can identify one of these themes that you think is relevant with your learners? A couple people raising their hand. Yeah, if we were, yes? What?
They're fluent in technology.
Right, they're fluent, to be fluent in technology and know how to use it with an aim for something meaningful, productive, work readiness. Anything else? The only other thing I would just kind of add quickly here is now, I recently went back to the United States, and I mean, this is unofficial, not formal research, but I was making some observations, and it seems like a lot of college students at an undergraduate level, instead of writing essays, they're putting together podcasts, or they're making videos. I'm talking basic assignments, not like IT-focused graduates. So this is really a shift in how learners, 21st century learners, are having to design technology. Okay, so just moving on, this is a really interesting piece of research that interviewed over 20,000, 22,000 UK learners, where the learners are saying they want their instructors to be more comfortable with digital technology. And they want their instructors to be acting as guides and facilitators. So this is kind of a shift where it's not just about us knowing all the content, even though the content that we know, is relevant and is important. Okay, so with that, let's jump into another quick little unofficial poll. Have you implemented PBL as a teaching methodology, problem-based learning? So number one, I'll go through the choices. Number one, no, I don't know about this method. 2, yes, I've implemented it or aspects of it. 3, I know what it is, but I've not tried it. 4, I want to learn more about it. 5, more than one answer applies. Okay, how many people are 1? You don't know about this method. Please vote. Pretend it's Australia. If you don't vote in Australia, you get a fine. This is a great way to implement democracy. Okay, so how many people are 1? No ones. How many people are 2? Couple people. How many people are 3? Okay, bunch more people. How many people are 4? Everybody should be in there. No, just kidding. And how many people are 5? Okay, great, we're a mixed bag. You're in the right place. Let's get into it, what PBL is and some of the different archetypes. So we'll start with a working definition from the University of Leicester in the UK. So it's really about not giving students all the answers, not giving students all the facts, not giving students all the information, actually giving them a problem, setting up a problem that they need to not only solve the problem, they have to develop a methodology to solve the problem. Okay, so I'd like to just give you a little bit of background in PBL. Now, there could be more than one progenitor of PBL, but this is one of the base progenitors. PBL actually emerged in North America in the 70s within medical education, because there was this question of why are all medical students of the same profile? They were seeing that medical students were largely Caucasian men, largely scored the same on tests, largely had this certain kind of same learning proclivities, and there was this question, are we having just one kind of learning method that's bringing in the same kind of students? They wanted to diversify it and make it a bit more ample. So problem-based learning was about looking at case studies, looking at problems, and it focused on talking and conversations as a way to navigate those case studies. That's in the 70s. You fast forward to today in 2019, it's practiced all over the world via every discipline. It's often interdisciplinary. There's a range of structures deployed. It's not one size fits all. And instead of just talking and conversations, it's about the communication channels within e-learning. Chatting on the phone, polling, discussion posts, blogging, a myriad of other e-learning channels. So essentially, just to recap some of these ideas before we get deeper in the archetypes, it's a scenario, equation, or puzzle that needs to be solved, and the process actually exploits the constraints of knowledge and experience of the learner, so to promote inquiry. And so what that means is it could really make the learner uncomfortable. because it's going to expose, I don't really know about this. So maybe I don't know who to be or where to go. Does that sound like some of your students? Sometimes they don't always know what to do, who to be, where to go. Okay. So it really is about this stimulus to mine for answers. Okay, so there's 3 different archetypes I'd like to discuss. The first one is a driving method of a course or module. The second one is PBL as a longer-term model, or longer-term project. And the third one is an everyday strategy that's built into a larger method. So as a driving method of a course or a module, this is when a department or a course actually designs their whole program around PBL. And we've seen that around different universities, like University College of Dublin. And they are actually, in this case, this is an interdisciplinary question. It's a big question, human impact and on the environment, can we strike a balance? So pulling in ethics and science and getting everybody on board to solve this problem. In Singapore, where I live, there's a polytechnic called Republic Polytechnic, and all of their courses are designed with PBL. I see some people familiar with that, and they do it by the week. There's a different problem every week that the learners engage with. Okay, so the second structure, the second archetype is a longer-term project. This may be directly a part of a course, or it could be outside of a course. I use this example from the college I was working at in Vietnam, where we did something called the $50 challenge. So we had a problem in our business program where learners weren't engaged, sleeping in class, totally checked out, and we said we have to do something about it. So we created what was called the $50 challenge, where groups of students could sign up, come up with a business plan, and prove how they could do something with social entrepreneurship that would make a profit. And then we aligned what we were doing with the course material in the business and management courses. It was very successful. We had over 70 students sign up with less than 5% dropping out. It did cause a lot of fighting. It did cause a lot of conflict because they actually were doing things. But in many ways, this was a better problem to have than total inertia. You know, I don't care about any of this. And this was a 3-month process, and this is kind of the end of where we did awards for some of the best teams. It's another way PBL can be implemented. The third way I'd like to talk about is where it's an everyday strategy built into a larger method. So maybe you've heard of this gentleman. His name is Manu Kapoor. He's an example of a practitioner. He's actually Singaporean. He worked in Hong Kong. He's Singaporean. Now he's in Europe. I believe he's in Switzerland. And essentially, what he coined is this idea of productive failure, that when students fail, it's okay, because then they can backtrack and figure out what, where and what and why they failed. And actually, this method, believe it or not, is actually being implemented by the ministry in Singapore. I think this is really, really impressive, because this is a very, I would say, perfectionist society, and they're actually allowing this lateral process to be put into their math programs. So another title for this is called impasse-driven learning, and it's when learners get stuck. They don't know what to do next. In this case, we can see that you know, we have a math problem, we have an incorrect answer, and then the whole work is about them figuring out where they went wrong and why the problem was ill-structured. So this is interesting how it's being implemented in the K through 12 environment in Singapore. And again, I highlight this because you might not want to do your whole course in PBL, but you might want to do just certain learning sequences. Oh, and if you have a copy of this report, I can give it to you. You can email me. You can find it online. This is all about this mechanism of productive failure. So in summary with PBL, we have this framework where learners are hypothesizing about a problem. This may involve branching, causation, resolution. Then they have to go out and find the facts through inquiry and build hypotheses. And this is when the learning issues really come out. The limitations of their synthesis, their limitations of maybe where they're finding information, their limitations of putting it all together, the gaps. This is where it gets very messy. And ultimately, learners produce an action plan in response. Could be a policy report, could be a recommendation, could be some sort of project. So let me ask you, before I go to the next slide, what kind of thinking do you think is needed with this kind of framework? How should students be thinking? And do you think that they would be open to this kind of framework? Because they have to tell themselves what to do. How many people think it'd be a challenge? Yeah, very challenging. And, you know, it really invites both divergent thinking and convergent thinking. And these processes are really critical skills that our learners, and not just our learners, that all of us need to have as we live our lives in the 21st century. So when do we get divergent? Where we're creating thoughts and not just running to Google for answers, cutting to the chase. Not just running and saying, well, the answer's out there and I just need to like find it on the net. No, we need to actually generate answers and new possibilities. This arguably could get a little messy. And then there's the convergent thinking, logical, sequential, sorting, making choices, about scrutinizing and judgment. So when we think of an engineer, how does the engineer think? Divergent or convergent? I actually sat, yeah, what do you think? What's that? Yeah, that's my answer too, convergent. I actually sat in a flight next to a retired engineer about a month ago. He worked for SQ for like 30 years. And I asked him this question and he said both. Yep, he said both. Interesting though. But maybe we have a default way to think, right? So let's do, oh, actually, I have a little activity. Ash, could you do me a favor? I'm going to ask you to, how about this? I'm going to ask you to pass something out. Can you pass these out to as many people as you can? Thank you. So my colleague Ash is going to be passing something out. And it's the same thing that maybe some of us will have to share. I have another one here. Some of you may have to share. Okay, thank you. Okay, so when you look up at the screen, what do you see? Numbers 1 through 100, don't you? Now, what if I told you, you may have to share, most of you have your own. You can take a pen out if you want, or you can do it by just sight. Helpful with a pen. There's 1 through 100 here. I want you to go in order from 1 to 100 and see how far you get. See how many numbers you can get. Does everybody understand? You'll start with 1. Does everybody see 1? Yeah. And then the next one will be 2. Okay, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Go. Just circle them as you go. 10 more seconds. Sorry, it's not enough light in the room, but. Okay, stop. How far did you get? Okay, so someone said 9, 7, 11, impressive. 8. Anybody else higher? 15, that's very impressive. Okay, so I didn't give you a lot of advice. I didn't give you a lot of perspective. What if I told you, you did that in 30 seconds. What if I said, actually, if you make a cross in the middle of the chart, where you have 53, 36, 34, 39, everybody see that? And if I told you it's counterclockwise, it's counterclockwise. So you can see 1 in that quadrant, 2 in this quadrant, 3 in this quadrant, 4 in that quadrant. You with me?
Yeah.
Now go. 20 seconds. See how far you get. Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's the same, but thank you. Okay, what was that like? Much easier, much faster, but still challenging, right? Definitely for me, looking at all those numbers, even with a smaller quadrant, it's challenging, but much easier. What did I just do? Yeah, I told you a way to look for the spots. I gave you some guidance. I narrowed the field. And you were able to move with more confidence and more efficiency. That's the role of the instructor with PBL. So at first I left you wide open, and maybe it was a bit tedious. And then you got a little more steam with the guidance. Okay? Now, with that, we're going to move on to liminal spaces and learning thresholds. We just went over the concept of sort of the guide on the side, giving perspective where needed. Okay, so we talked about 3 different kinds of archetypes, and now we're going to talk about this idea of liminality. Liminality is being used a lot in education right now. It's an interdisciplinary concept, and it's about learning thresholds. How many of you have heard this term liminality? And if you haven't, it's all right. Liminality actually comes from anthropology. And the liminality is the in-between state of not knowing what to do or who to be. It's when we're not sure. It's not bad or good. It's just when something has ended before something else begins. And a liminal space can occur between a major ritual that changes the norm of our life. So in modern, the 21st century modernity, it's maybe a bit harder to locate. But if we look at our ancestors who maybe practiced religion a bit more, not that we don't practice religion now, people in the room may practice religion now, which is great, but we had more of these kind of collective rituals. So learners experience this liminality, and they function in liminal spaces. Every demand we make of the learner actually puts them in this liminal space where they're not exactly sure who to be or what to do. Let's talk about liminal spaces just a bit more so we really get this concept. It could be after finishing high school but before college. It could be after a period of dating but before marriage. After graduating but before you get a job. After leaving a job but before you get a new one. After finishing a major project but before it's made public. After living in your hometown with your family, your parents, but before you settle into your own place. In between religious or spiritual milestones. Does that make sense? How many of you can identify, I see people nodding, which is great. How many of you can identify a liminal space in your life? Most of us have had many, right? Yes. Anybody want to mention one? But if it can help you, you don't have to mention it out loud. Privately is fine. But think about how maybe you weren't sure who you were, and you weren't sure exactly where you were going. It was a threshold, and that's what our learners experience. A learner threshold is in between of what you don't know or who you're supposed to be. And this is the plight of our learners. So we want to be creating a digital learning environment, getting into the last part of this presentation, where learners can actually be in liminal spaces, and that's part of the process. So there's a question of knowledge, identity, and role of professional action. It can be kind of an untidy process. So what I'd like us to do now, I'm actually going to give you a problem. It's last few minutes, not going to take too long, and your job is going to be to share your feelings and develop questions from your feelings or thoughts. Doesn't have to be feelings. Could be feelings, could be thoughts. We're actually going to do PBL right now. Again, I'm launching a problem. Continuation of the problem. witnessed a problem that needs to be solved? Okay, many people's hands are in the air, but do you know how to solve it right now?
Maybe like create awareness of people avoid using plastic. That's
Ye-
why little way.
So what I'd like you to do is if you go to menti.com and use the code 688679, you can share your thoughts. What would you need to do next to solve this problem? The argument now is that maybe we all are, some of us are in a liminal space. We don't know exactly who to be or what to do regarding a problem. And this is something our learners experience all the time. Yeah, menti.com, use this code. Let me know if the code works. Should work. Is anybody able to get in? Anybody able to get in? Give me a hand. Working? Is it working? Okay, good. So we have some responses. I might also ask you how the videos made you feel, how seeing the problem made you feel. I look so serious all the time. Okay, we're seeing this constant theme of build more awareness, create more awareness. If I was your professor, I might be challenging you. What does that mean, right? That's the problem. So the problem, we got a double problem. We got the problem going on right now with the aquatic life, but then we have the problem of what does it mean to create awareness? Create humanity values, yes. So are we all thinking exactly the same? We're not. There's some common themes, some divergent perspective. How many people, just be honest, how many people are ready to take action right this second? Be honest. Are you ready to reduce? Some of you are. Some of us, I mean no disrespect, but you're not going to. And I'm not saying that to judge you. I'm saying that so you can identify with your students. So you can see how your students, some know what to do, right? And go the next step. And some really need a quick, mild win. Now with that, we'll come back to this, but with that, I'd like to show you the PBL course inside the Open LMS. So we have the same activity that I did with you on the slides here inside the Open LMS. And the same activity I just did with you, showing the videos, right here in the Open LMS. And then I have a chat space set up for you to just share your emotions and thoughts. And I call this a low commitment tool. The learner doesn't have to commit to anything yet. And this is needed because they are not ready to commit to the concepts. I see some people nodding, and I feel like maybe you're educators that understand where I'm coming from, right? We have to leverage some kind of victory with these small victories, with these learners that just aren't ready to go deep. Then we have polling, a bit of a deeper commitment, where there's an article more about plastic consumption. Then I have a collaborate session, actually a wonderful solution that allows them to have their own digital conferencing space where they do deeper analysis. And so essentially what I'm showing you here, just cut right back to the slide presentation, is a commitment spectrum of tools and activities. So these are some of the tools. I just showed you a couple of quick ones in the Open LMS, but we can see that they don't all require the same level of commitment. And this is how we need to be setting up PBL or arguably any kind of learning sequence, because all of our learners are not committing to understanding at the same level. Isn't it true? Everybody's nodding. We know it's true. They're not a monolith. They are not. And yet, all of them need to take steps to be able to foster their growth in understanding. And we can see where the choice and the chat tool are lower commitment, quick win to get them involved. The forum and maybe some of the assignments in Wiki, these are larger commitment. And you, as a practitioner, can actually automate this and be setting this up so to foster a more successful learning environment. Okay, does anybody have any comments or questions? Thoughts about this? And this is another framework in which we actually frame out the Open LMS tools with different kinds of learning events and how the tools can actually express learning event. So you just watched the whales, right? The whales are dying from the plastic. How did you all feel? Anybody brave enough to share their emotion? Sad, frustrated, maybe? Angry. What's that? What's that? I can't hear it. Worried. I agree. And so you can think about what kind of learning event might you need at this point. Maybe you need to do more debating. Maybe you need to do more exploring. This is where we can make choices and then connect the dots with the digital learning environment. Okay, you guys have been really a wonderful, wonderful group. And thank you so much for giving me your full attention. I'm really impressed. I don't even see people on their phones, distracted. It's very, very wonderful thing. Thank you. I want to be able to summarize the points we've gone over. So we started out with the PLD, the Personal Learning Designer. This can orient learners to quickly to key redirection and remediation. Sometimes you need to just guide the learner a bit into where they're going. That's a PLD tool is in our Open LMS. Now, problem-based learning, it's practiced around the world now, different institutions, and it requires both divergent and convergent thinking. We want to be able to use digital tools that honor both, and there's different archetypes that we can be framing our problem-based learning. Quick curiosity. How many of you are actually a little inspired to give it a try more or to implement it a bit more? How many of you would like to have it a driving method of a course or module? Okay, a couple hands. How about a longer term project? One person, awesome. How about an everyday strategy built into the larger method? This is maybe the easiest way to begin, right? Where you just kind of have like an activity or an objective with a certain problem. Okay, learners experience changing ways of being and knowing during the PBL process. It's learning thresholds, it's liminal spaces. They go through these different spaces. Open LMS tools can easily set up these liminal spaces for developing knowledge, changing identity, and the role of professional action at different levels of commitment. We need to be able to have courses that really honor those different levels. Okay, thank you so much. Any questions before my colleague Ash comes on? Comments? All right, well, I will, Ash, come on down or come on up. I will share my email one more time. Feel free to email me. Don't be a stranger. Love to hear your thoughts and where you're going with your work.
Okay. I'll stand for this. I hope you guys can hear me all right. Thank you, Susan, for the presentation. As she mentioned, my name is Ash. I am one of the solutions engineers for Blackboard here in the Asia Pacific region. As you can tell, I also have a North American accent. However, I'm from Canada, but I do live in Singapore as well. So what I want to talk to you guys about today is Blackboard's open source learning management system, or what we call the Open LMS. This is based on Moodle, which I'm sure everybody here is probably familiar with. And what I want to talk about today is what Blackboard delivers, based on the Moodle platform with our Open LMS product. So we have 3 different mission statements within Blackboard here. As you can see, connected experience, the data-driven insights, and having flexible solutions. I'll go one by one and explain kind of what these mean for you. So with a connected experience, we like to think of the learning management system, whatever that may be, as the core of the educational platform, and then you can bring in other tools and plugins and whatnot that you may already have and start building a network or a learning network for your learners. With data-driven insights, as these students learn, they start inputting activities. You can start withdrawing information from that activity. However, if you don't have a way of analyzing that activity or digesting it, it's really just noise in the background, right? You want to know what your students are doing, how they're doing, and perhaps where their learning path is taking them. So with the platform itself, we have a slew of different reports and customizable analytics that you can take and look at each learner on a one-by-one basis, or the overarching trend for your course or your classes. And flexible solutions, being an open source based product, you have full host of tools and connectivity to be able to really customize and modify the LMS, at the core of your learning platform to really whatever you see fit and how you want to deliver your content. So let's talk about what the Open LMS is. It is our, as I mentioned, learning management system, and we have 6 different areas that we like to focus with this, right? So one of the most important ones that I would, in my millennial expertise, deem would be that yellow box up there, mobile accessibility. Now, by show of hands, how many of you would say probably 99% of your students have some sort of mobile device on them on a day-to-day basis, right? So what's the easiest way to get your content to them? Through that mobile device. That's always going to be in their pocket. Mine's in my pocket right now. Yours is probably on your lap or in your hands. So we like to make the Open LMS extremely mobile friendly. The design of it is fully responsive. So whether you're using the mobile app, whether you're using an iPad, whether they're using their iPhone, whatever it may be, the system modifies and customizes itself to that delivery method. The user experience, we like to make it simple. We like to make it easy to use. If your learner's having a lot of issues, they have to click around a lot, they have to dig into different menus, they're not going to want to use the system. You get on Facebook and they spend billions of dollars, for example, on user experience just so it's easy for their clientele to access it. We kind of want to offer the same experience there. Susan discussed using tools like chats and discussion forums and surveys to help open up communication. So while a student may be digesting their information, on their own, on their way home, for example, on the BTS or something, they can, also be on a collaborative session and chatting with their group members, for example, all remotely, but, together at the same time. Oops. And then, last but not least, we're cloud-based, so there's no infrastructure, there's no nothing. Anyone can access it as long as there's an internet connection. It's a very lightweight, easy-to-use system. And then the services and support. Now, this is particularly important. Blackboard Open LMS has a huge user community. We have some of our clients, for example, in the Philippines have created their own what they call PBUG, where they join together as this user group and they start sharing best practices and ideas and how they're using the system and what kind of responses they're getting from learners. And they kind of just keep sharing these experiences and growing from that together. Let's move forward here. So just some of the different institutions that are using the Open LMS here. So I'm just going to skip forward a little bit here and talk about what the system looks like. So who here uses Moodle or has used Moodle or an open source product, right? So if you're familiar with it at all, you'll see Moodle is a very block-heavy or box-heavy user interface. It's very clunky. It's a little bit slow to use. I wouldn't say slow to use, but a little bit click-heavy, right? So what we've done is we've created this Snap theme, which is available, and it makes it much easier to use, much more user-friendly, much more Web 2.0, quote-unquote. I'll show you this live here just so you get an idea of what it looks like. But at the core tenet of it is that it's a responsive design. It's mobile-friendly, as I discussed earlier. So when a user logs in, and we'll, again, go through this live shortly here, this is the interface that they'll see. The courses are organized in tiles. They'll have an activity feed on the right-hand side, which will show what's due for assignments or quizzes or anything like that. If there's an instructor, if you log in as an instructor, you'll see, hey, how many assignments do I have to grade, for example? And when is that grading due? Any messages they might have received from other classmates or from a learner if you're an instructor. Everything is organized into this nice little interface here. Now, content creation, arguably one of the most important parts of a learning management system. How easy is it for you as a facilitator to actually start putting learning material into the learning management system itself? So, as you can see there in the bottom right-hand corner, it's drag and drop. It's that simple. You can, and I'll do this live shortly, just drag something from your desktop onto there. It will put it into a course section. However, that's not the only way. You can start creating activities such as quizzes, assignments, and interactive content. Maybe you want to upload a video, but within that video, start making it interactive. Pause the video, pop a question. What do you think about this? And the learner won't be able to continue, for example, without answering said questions. Now, one of the 6 statements I had earlier was the support. Now, we do have regular webinars where our technical team, our product management team will come down and they'll start creating a collaborative response with institutions about perhaps, what they would like to see in the product or issues they're facing or problems that they might want to solve. So some improvements that you can see that we've added were, things that people ask, well, maybe emojis, for example, for chat, etc. So these little collaborations start adding and building functionality that institutions want, and they can really customize how they deliver their learning materials. Now, I talked about we are a global user community. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of clients around the world. Everybody can log into the user community and start posting questions, best practices. They can talk about new releases, bugs, etc. We want to keep this very open dialogue for everybody. So, excellent way of accessing all that dialogue and information. Now, and yearly we recognize some of our clients that share these best practices with our Catalyst Award, again, with our research community. Now, I'm going to jump right into the interface because that's the actual fun stuff here. So just bear with me for 1 second. All right, let's hope that doesn't fall onto my face. So what I'm going to do here is actually log into the Blackboard Open LMS. And let me zoom in to make this probably a little bit easier for you guys to read here. So this is just a sandbox environment. I want to give you guys a feel with this. I don't want to go through and do a feature by feature thing, but I just want to show you what it looks like and how easy it is for a learner or an instructor to use the product here. So as I mentioned, this is that user interface here. So I'm logged in as an instructor. Student would see very much the same thing. You could see the different courses that we have here. It's tile-based. If I minimize this, you'll see that the interface will restructure, right? So if they're on a mobile device, for example, they're not going to lose any functionality. They'll get the full experience as a laptop user or desktop user. The courses, if a student has a course that's particularly important to them and they want to focus on it, they can favorite it. It'll go right up to the top. They can access, as I mentioned, their deadlines, messages, forum posts. Very easy to use, very clean interface. You mentioned you're familiar with Moodle. Stark difference between the block style there.
How is it different from Blackboard and Canvas?
So Blackboard Open LMS is it's open source product, right? So Canvas, exactly, yeah. So Open LMS is also a pay solution. However, the back end to it, if somebody on Moodle has created a plugin that you like, you can import that and use it, right? It's a very open back end, so you can customize and modify however you see fit on there. Okay? Now, I'm just going to show you what a course looks like. This is, and excuse me for this, it is a very simple course, but it'll give you an idea of what it looks like. So the first thing that you see when I log in here is this pop-up message, right? Now, Susan discussed this earlier with the personalized learning designer. So what we've done right now is set up a rule that says when a student or a learner logs in, send them a message that says, hey, welcome back to the course, so on and so forth. Now, this could be anything. This could be maybe I've taken a quiz and I failed that quiz. So instead of this instructor manually reaching out to me and say, hey, here's some learning materials, the system will recognize that and redirect that user and say, you know what, you didn't do so well on this. Here's some more learning materials. And once you finish that, then we'll let you redo the quiz there. Okay? All automatic, hands-off experience for you. Now, the actual course itself, pretty simple, as you saw a quick example of it earlier with Susan's slides there. But you'll see different sections. You can see the different chapters, for example, within the syllabus here, and surveys and assignments that the instructor has added. I want to show you, just like I mentioned before, how easy it is to upload content into here. So I'll open up one of the sections up here. And we've already put a YouTube video embedded in there. You can upload your own videos. But I'm going to just drag, for example, since this is a geography course, a world map onto here. Right? And it's that easy to put content in within your course. Okay? You don't have to just drag and drop content in here. You can gate it behind, for example, activity completion. You won't be able to view this content before completing this quiz, right? So you can have a very sequential learning experience for your users. Other content that I discussed here, discussion forums, chat boxes, quizzes. It is as simple as creating a quiz, giving it a name, and start discussing how you want to grade it. Maybe you want to restrict access to this quiz with timelines, for example. You want them to manually be able to complete it. You require a specific grade, so on and so forth. So you start building all these different criteria that you start applying to the course, and you can really guide your learners down a path that you deem reasonable for them. All right? Now, the other thing that I want to discuss was the data side of, or the analytics side of the learning experience here. So Blackboard Open LMS will actually allow you to start gathering learner activity and learner grades. So I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. So as an instructor, if you log in, you could start taking a look at the actual learner dashboards, for example. So, if I open up the courses, for example, as this, and let me zoom in to make this easier for you guys to read. You can see all the different courses, for example, that this instructor is teaching. And you want to open up a specific course and say, for example, how are my learners doing? What are their grades and their activities? You'll see their names, email addresses, etc. But what their current grade is, how much time they've spent within the course, how many times they visit that specific activity, and then actually go right into your dashboard, for example, and start looking at the different courses and details around them. So this analytics tool takes all the information as your students use it on a daily basis and starts compiling and aggregating that data. So instead of you having to do it manually through an Excel spreadsheet, for example, of grades and activities and things like that, all done automatically here. How much time do they spend on quizzes? How much time do they spend on assignments? So on and so forth. Right? So if you have you can start breaking down how learners start using the course there. All right? Yes?
Can Blackboard provide like webinar sessions, like real-time, online, face-to-face discussions?
Yes. So one of the tools that Susan talked about earlier was a tool that we call Collaborate. And that allows for, as the name suggests, a collaborative workspace. So they'll do video conferencing, they can make it audio only, they can have a shared whiteboard, for example, where they can start jot down notes, share content, not just stream the content, they can actually upload files and share it with their peers through that tool. And you can start, for example, scheduling weekly. Maybe they're doing a group discussion that's due at the end of the semester. They can do, weekly, Fridays at 1 p.m., do a 1-hour Collaborate session. And it'll do attendance tracking, actually see who showed up, and record it, share it out, etc.
I saw a wiki just now.
Mm-hmm.
So can the students from all over the world work into one group, that they can collaborate and
If-
meet in one group?
Yeah, so if they're enrolled within that course, then if you've added a wiki onto there, then they would be able to access it, no matter where they are. Again, as long as there's an internet connection, then collaborate as much as they want.
I would just add one quick thing, if you
Sure.
don't mind. You kind of also, in addition with the Collaborate space, if you wanted to have a guest come in, a guest presenter or expert, you could easily just share a link with them, so they don't have to be enrolled in the course to attend the Collaborate session. It's another opportunity.
Yeah. All right.
How about exam? Can you do online exam, like final exam for students, Like in Malaysia, we still they promote ODL courses, but when they come to exam, they go back to face-to-face traditional mode of exam, sitting down, So can Blackboard offer a real online exam, like being monitored or, how do
I mean, yes and no at the same time. We can you can upload assignments and tests and quizzes. You can lock down the browser so they can't switch out.
Authentication,
And
how you want to ensure that
verify that's that specific student. Yeah. So yeah, and that's the no part of it that I'm talking about is we can do the examinations and the assessments online. However, you don't have that secure, personal authentication that way because they could just have someone log in. Again, that's the nature of having a remote learner try to take an exam. It's yeah.
question they always ask me. So I don't know how to answer too as an auditor, as an assessor.
Yeah, no, it comes up, and right now it's kind of a limitation everywhere. Again, if someone's remote, yeah.
I audit a lot of our Malaysian qualification agency program, so for ODL mode, so we ask them to do online exam because they offer ODL mode. But they
Yeah, so I've worked with some, sorry, go
can I
ahead.
take that question?
Yeah.
So my name is Simon with Blackboard. So this is a very famous question. So there are technology out there today that actually tie in with video that looks at the students sitting for the exam and the movement of their eyes. You know, Nick talked about this before. I just need to find out what's the technology, but it can actually tie together for you to do this online exam. But a lot of our clients that we work with, they do this proper examinations environment, right? So you have 500 students, 40 students, depending on what. They come into the lab, they sit in here, and you have an English.
Practical also because these people are working adults, so they are working somewhere else and they want to sit for exam. So these people say that okay, at certain time, you can log in and sit for the exam. So I heard that these students in Dubai, he's sitting for his exam but at home. He's doing his exam at home, online.
So we can do that. So just this task alone, we can do that. So, but if you are saying, how do you verify this person sitting for the task is the person? That's a big question. It could be the twin, right?
Yeah.
So you do not know.
But I think the mentality of our students also must change also the mindset, trust and honesty. For maybe the European students like Scandinavian countries, their mindset really set to be honest.
Yeah.
But for Asian students and sometimes these people, they are very tricky and finicky, they want to do all sorts of tricks. So maybe we have to train our students to be honest and trust, that's through my experience. Because these people, when I talk to them, they are very honest, they don't cheat. My students in Malaysia or other countries, they will tend to employ somebody to do the exam or even assignment.
So here we are. Okay, so you're referring to the working adults as the group of learners, right? So yeah. So but in the higher education space, where we also spend a lot of time in, this kind of environment doesn't really exist. It's usually proctored environment. Yeah. It's okay. Alright. So
With that being said, and thank you for your questions. That's still think an ongoing discussion. With that being said, that's kind of the, quick introduction to the Open LMS, the interface, the type of contents that you can import, and kind of some of the strengths that it brings, being that it's an open source product, but also has the backing of this worldwide community and the team that would support it. Does anyone have any questions at all, or concerns, anything like that? Yes.
Back to the question about the exam, I heard you mention about something that when you assign a student to do the exam, you can log out the browser.
Yeah. So again, what I talked about in one of the features there was the ability to have different plugins and features that you modify and add in. So you can have a plugin called Respondus. So it's a lockdown browser. So when they take an assessment within that, then they can't alt-tab out of it, for example. It locks it until they've completed the assignment, and then once they've done that, then they can start having.
Even on their own mobile device.
Yes.
Another thing I'll just add, there are a number of ways you can set up a test in Open LMS in terms of releasing it at different times, mixing up the questions. I mean, we do have clients that use a number of these strategies that make it much more difficult for fraud. So that's just something we can have another conversation about after this session if you'd like.
Anything else?
You love the questions. You should start giving up.
Yeah.
Actually, we have some things to give out,
Yeah.
so we can give them out, Ash.
Yeah.
Questions.
Yeah. We have,
Let's give them.
I don't know if you guys like your privacy, but I always use these little camera covers on my laptop.
You
So,
learned one for sure.
Yeah.
I must be under.
Yeah.
That one and the gentleman in the back.
yeah. Yeah.
You're welcome.
All right. Any other questions? You get a prize out of it. So,
Anybody want to share what you're looking for with a digital learning environment? Maybe something we didn't mention, either one of us?
it's the end of the day.
Everybody needs a cup of coffee.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, if there's nothing else, thank you all for joining and listening to Dr. Susan Deloya and myself. As mentioned, if you have any questions, etc., reach out to us, and we'll definitely help you out as best as we can.